Hello, and welcome to Two Pews in a Pod. Join us as we explore faith in a modern world at Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick, Maryland. Now here are your hosts, Pastor Paul Baglios and Deacon Megan Wyant.
I'm Megan Wyant.
And I'm Paul Baglios.
And this is Two Pews in a Pod podcast. And this is the second of 4 episodes in our series of Stories of Call. Today, Paul and I will be talking about our experiences in the call of ordained ministry. And today we're going to be talking about moments in which we feel uplifted and refreshed in the work that we do. The work of ministry requires a lot of leaders, and I'm wondering, Paul, what experiences that you have had that have helped you feel refreshed and maintain that sense of call.
So there are many. I thought I would speak first about what is for me the most recurrent one. And I was trying to recall if in a previous podcast series I may already have talked about this. I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but for me the most recurrent one is serving people the sacrament of Holy Communion.
Yes.
Approaching people and placing in their hands the wafer or the bread and saying to them those words of grace, the body of Christ given for you.
Yes.
Looking into their eyes in many cases. There are some people who are intentionally in a posture of prayer, perhaps, where their faces might be downturned, their gaze is averted, but always their hands are open.
Yeah.
And I always look at those hands, and in the course of a congregation, there are many hands. Some are so tiny, and some are larger and also
Weathered,
much fuller of years, wrinkles, perhaps the scars or the diminishment of injuries suffered, the knobs perhaps of some arthritis, but always that action, even as I speak of it, I don't think I'll choke up, but even as I speak of it, I feel caught up in the emotional awareness that I can't imagine doing anything else.
right?
That I am entirely connected, entirely at one in those moments with what the church has called me to do and to be. I am entirely at one in my having said yes, as you know, yes by the help of God, which is how we respond to questions about the promises we are asked to make in ordination. And in those moments, perhaps most acutely, that yes that I spoke 40 years ago becomes renewed.
It's kind of funny you said that, and it made me remember so many days ago when I was ordained. I've given and helped feed our people before, but there was something so different about that act when I was ordained, and everybody knows I sobbingly handed out communion to the congregation because it was that sense of not only importance of what I was doing, but feeling really like at one with my call. Like this is what I'm meant to do, is feed my sheep, right? And I just kept thinking that, looking into the faces of all these amazing people. And it literally brought me to tears, to the point that our music director was like, I don't know if I can eat this, because I'm like, cry.
There's a wafer that's been liberally moistened with the tears of Megan.
Tears of the deacon. But it's such a beautiful thing, that simple action that we take. Yeah.
For me, another one, and there are many, and as I think about this, I'm realizing how often it's physical proximity and touch. Another one for me is when I'm with someone in a hospital bed, especially if they are weak, especially if there is an illness that is gaining ground on health, especially if that dark shadow of death is encroaching.
Right.
The capacity to be present with a person in that situation, and usually others who
Yes.
love that person.
Right. And hospital staff and nurses,
Yes.
I think is something that's like beautiful about that too. The cloud of witnesses is there.
I think we have done some of this together, but I know one of the things that I often do, and I did it earlier today, visiting with someone in a hospital room, I will ask everybody who's there with the person that we will encircle the person and we will all put a hand on them as we pray for their healing, for their safekeeping, whatever direction that will turn. If there is medical staff that is in the room, I will often invite them to be part of that with us.
Yes, by choice.
Yes. Well, and my prayer in that situation almost always includes prayer for the medical staff.
Yes, right.
And
that's really beautiful.
those are situations, too, in which, again, I would describe it as feeling completely at one with what I have been called to be and do. And all the other stuff falls away in that moment.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that all the other stuff is unimportant, that it doesn't have value. I think it does have value.
Sure.
But not everything that we do in our work as ordained ministry leaders belongs to the core of what the church has entrusted to us to do.
Yeah. I think there's something really beautiful about the intimacy of those moments, right? Of being there and the idea of feeding along with holding someone and holding space for them and their, when they're on their deathbed, when things aren't looking good, there's such a beauty there. I would say for me, one of the things that always invigorates me is just the opportunities when I teach. Whether it's a Bible study or a devotional walk or confirmation class in youth group or preschool, often during the prep work of it, I think about how I told you just earlier today, there's two things I'm leading tonight and how it can fill my head. But when I'm in that moment, in that space, teaching, something often switches over. And it's almost often, if I hit a groove, becomes almost out of body.
Yeah.
Where I feel like it's not really me speaking anymore. And it doesn't mean I'm not aware of my humanism and I mess up, but there is something really beautiful in the act of teaching and being with others and asking questions and being stumped together.
Yeah.
I think that to me, often when I leave confirmation class and it's dark most of the year when we leave and we're exhausted, but at the same time, it's like an adrenaline rush. I feel so good and so in touch with who I am and as a leader and what I'm meant to be doing.
Since you mentioned confirmation, I know and you take primary responsibility for that. I know many times, like in that sort of responsibility, 10 minutes before it's ready to begin, I know that I could be thinking, oh, it's a long day, I'm tired, and yet I have this still to do. And then the people show up.
Yes.
And suddenly I feel like I get to do this. I get to be part of this with them.
Yes.
What you say about hearing the questions they ask, seeing the enthusiasms they bring.
Seeing connections be made,
Or even seeing the weariness that they
absolutely.
bring. Their presence entrusts one another and all of us who get to serve with them, not only in the confirmation group, but among all the people of the congregation. Their presence is an act of trust.
Yes.
And I find people showing up refreshes and renews me in my sense of call.
Absolutely. And I feel the same way. It's when we gather, right? It's like when we gather together, regardless of what we're doing, that's really where I also feel at one and at peace, whether it's, doing service or just going and sitting and having coffee, whenever we're gathering, that all of a sudden all the weight is lifted.
And what the Spirit often does, so we, as of this recording, we're trying something a little different here at Evangelical Lutheran Church. that during worship, when we share the peace of God with one another, we have started to say to all those gathered, please now share God's peace and share your name.
Right.
This past weekend was the first time that we did that. And I was so overjoyed to see the happy energy at all three of our worship services. There was a bit of laughter and chuckle, but people did that with
Right.
one another, and they did it without protest. They did it without resistance. They did it with gratitude and energy.
Yes. Yeah. There's something important about learning names, right? And knowing one another.
Yeah.
And I think there's a holiness to that too. Sometimes I think it's often the most simple things that sometimes make me feel refreshed. We were joking when we were planning this podcast today that it was things as simple as like having a coworker run and get you coffee, but there's something there too of having
Thank you, Marie.
Of having someone tend and care to you on that really basic level, a coffee. Right? A card that someone writes you and you're completely surprised. Those small, simple things.
So we should be intentional because this is the Alice Fisher podcast series, episode 2 of A Plan 4. Alice, we're giving you another shout out.
This is a shout out for Alice.
Among her many gifts, Alice is one of those people who is so generous toward me. Almost every week, I'll get a very thoughtful email from her. And most of the time, I take the time to thank her for doing that. Many people will say, and I'm sure you hear this as well, I'm praying for you.
Right.
And over the years since I was ordained, how often and in how many different settings people have said, I'm praying for you. We have every Thursday morning, we have at 11 o'clock a Bible study that meets via Zoom. Alice is one of the most faithful participants in that Bible study. And we always open as people are logging in, we have a bit of chat, but then we start with a prayer. And I will usually ask one of them, sometimes Alice, to open us with a prayer. And I don't expect anyone ever to do this.
Right.
But many times the person praying will say, and thank you for Pastor Baglios leading us. That is such a humbling.
Yeah.
It's humbling to hear it.
Yes.
It's humbling to be part of a prayer in which I'm named.
Right.
And talk about being refreshed and renewed in a sense of call. That yes, we are called to bear a responsibility of care for the people of the community we serve, but they are also bearing us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the other things that happens, and it always happens when you're feeling at your worst, whether you are or not, and it's always at Walmart, is when I run into and I'm disheveled and I'm not feeling like I'm in my role as minister, right? Or
no tweed jacket.
I know, no tweed jacket ever. Yep. But maybe my hair is crazy and maybe I'm just running out to get groceries. But when I come across our congregation members and we have aisle conversations, and sometimes it's those moments that remind me that this is not just a uniform or a role I get to put on when I'm here.
Yeah.
That I'm bearing that out into the community and out into the world with our people, and meeting them there as well. It's this moment of like, oh, we're both human. We're both here looking for deodorant. We're both here looking for bananas. That all of a sudden we have great conversations in an aisle. And that's often when I feel like people will meet and they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry we haven't been to church because of all these things come spilling out. Yep. And I always remember in that moment, it's humbling to me because I'm just Megan trying to get a banana.
Yeah.
And yet I was able to meet somebody where they were and help carry the weight of whatever they were carrying. So a lot of times it's those funny little coincidences of running into people in their worlds.
When you say, I'm just Megan, it's a wonder of what happens in ordination. It's easy to use flowery theological language about it. but I experienced the truth of that flowery
Yes.
theological language. Our bishop here, Bishop Bill Gohl, always talks about ordination as the church's gift. It's a weighty gift.
Yes.
It's not a gift about status. It's a gift to bear God's care for God's people in our own, I'm just Megan, I'm just Paul
Right.
realities. Yeah. And the fact that people are willing to see us
Yes.
as God bearers because that's what we've been called to be. And we all are. Baptism is our call
Right.
to be God bearers. But for those of us who are ordained, there is an added dimension of public accountability.
Yes.
And to be recognized in that way. You go to Walmart to get a banana.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, at my own home, I had come out from the back of our house. I think I had my dog with me. I had just a T-shirt and pants on.
That's good.
Yeah, I did have. Yes, I had pants on, but I was
Yes,
not
casual,
dressed
right, yeah.
for the work that I do in my role, and heard a familiar voice calling from a distance. Hi, Pastor Bag of Donuts, which is a nickname that some of our young people use for me. And I looked, and several houses down was one of our young people here at the congregation. As it turns out, one of my neighbors is a friend of his.
Great.
And he was
cool.
visiting that friend. They were out shooting hoops.
Yeah, I love that.
And to be called in that way, to be called
Right.
in a greeting, is to be renewed in a sense of call.
Yeah.
That I am just Paul,
But
and
also,
yet,
there's a very Lutheran both and there.
yeah.
Yeah. That you still are that individual, but at the same time are bearing, it is a weight, but it's a good weight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something that I always feel refreshed, but really it's whenever we're with our people, right? Whether we're feeding them or holding space for them, that's when we are, I feel like for me, that's when I'm refreshed, and it sounds like that's when you are refreshed as well. Yeah.
Sometimes the busyness of responsibilities that can stack one on top of another in the course of a day or a week can be and really feel quite exhausting. And I know that there are days that till I get to maybe the last thing waiting for me in the day,
Right.
I feel like I'm not bringing nearly as much as I brought to earlier things. On the other hand, there are often times that I have, and I'm wondering if maybe this could be, I'll hope this might be part of what happens for you this evening.
Yeah.
With the things that I know are stacked up. That sometimes I'm tending to one responsibility and I'm realizing I'm receiving what I need for the next responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. I think that often gets me through the day. It's these little moments where I feel fed throughout the day. But a lot of it too is collegiality.
Yes.
Is working with people we have a great team and staff here, and I feel refreshed often when we're together. And I think it's because of that sense of like it gives us a little bit, Spirit is giving us a little bit to get us through to that next thing, that next energy burst. And we're also good at saying, have you had a snack?
Yeah.
Do you need a nap?
Slim Jims.
Do you need a Slim Jim?
Yep.
Do I need a banana?
Right.
Yeah, I think there is having that team too that helps us get through. And if you are feeling overwhelmed, to just say, hey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. There's so many times I've said that to you or Marie or Daniel or one of our other staff members, and they give me that little boost, that little bit of notice, and I see you. You're amazing. Keep going. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect note on
Perfect.
which to conclude
Hallmark card
this
ending.
particular episode. I see you, Megan.
I see you, Paul.
And we see you by way of anticipation who have watched or listened. It's good to be with you again. We have 2 more episodes in this particular series. I'm Paul Baglios.
And I'm Megan Wyant. Thank you for joining us.
As we move into the fall here at ELC, we're preparing for the wonder that is the upcoming Christmas season. With the busyness of this time of year, our episodes for Two Pews in a Pod will now be released on the first and third Monday of each month. We look forward to continuing our exploration of faith with all of you in the months to come. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.